Yeah, participant.
Hello. How's it going? I'm James. I'm a co-founder at Abridged, and we are building tools to offer anyone to come in and really quickly and easily interact with blockchain applications. That's like the basic thing that we do. And this talk is going to be about DAOs and UX. And so, just to begin, interesting. Okay, to begin, so this is going to be the overview, and so we'll have a sort of vision, what are DAOs, where they come from, the reality of where we are with DAOs and adoption today, and then what needs to happen as far as UX in order to make DAOs a more sustainable thing. And also a definition check, what are DAOs? It's a mechanism for humans to pool and manage resources for some sort of collective purpose. I'm also curious, how many people are actually involved in a DAO today? Could you raise your hands? Okay, so like 80% raising hands. That's really interesting. And also, if you're attending ETH Denver, you actually are involved with the largest DAO to date. Every member who's attending ETH Denver was automatically submitted into a DAO of like 2,500 people with the DAO stack. So largest DAO to date, largest DAO active. That's like within the DAO frameworks of Aragon, DAO stack, and Moloch. So the collective vision, like what are DAOs and why are they important? I think that really DAOs are the reason that what inspired Ethereum and crypto in the first place. Bitcoin in a lot of ways is a DAO. It's one of the more autonomous DAO structures to date. And Vitalik, you could even see back in his beginning ideas, the formation of Ethereum, his first ideas were about DAO structures and collective frameworks for organizations to use crypto and blockchain. We're also inspired by like Eleanor Ostrom, who is a revolutionary social and economic scientist who's focused on commons pool resource management for sustainable development. And we also want to sort of see these kinds of principles, so these large structures that are DAOs, plus the sustainable resource management philosophy, coordinated at a mass scale to do things like iterate on governance and find ways to solve for the larger issues that we face today. There's a lot of sort of existential issues I think that humanity faces today, and DAOs could be a way to sort of figure that out. At a smaller scale too, it's also a way for like international coordination and remote work to be facilitated. So in Web3, Bitcoin and Ethereum, as I mentioned earlier, are essentially DAOs. Everyone can kind of like participate, you own a piece of the network, and you're incentivized to create value for that network so that all boats can rise. Moloch and Metacartel are also DAOs, but they're different. They're permissioned DAOs. They have a bit more of a specific intention and purpose with that permission structure for entry. So you have this open network side of the DAOs, which are Bitcoin and Ethereum, and then you have permissioned DAO structures, which are more like decentralized organizations. And then again, international coordination, transparent resource management, and an evolution of social networks. DAOs are essentially the social piece for cryptocurrency and blockchain. But the harsh reality of today is that there's really not many people here. IDEO Collabs actually came out with a report with a number of others, the state of crypto, and in December, the DAU of the entire blockchain industry was 60,000 people. It's just not very many people. And within DAOs itself, I've like been doing as much research as I could. I found that the population at peak is 6,400. And that also includes a 4,800 person DAO in DAO Stack that is no longer active. The projects funded though have been significant. So we funded like probably nearly 200 projects and just deployed about $3 million in capital across Aragon, DAO Stack, and Moloch frameworks. That said, the number of organizations, this is also a bit of a false number. This is the number of organizations that have been spun up. There's about 10% of these organizations that are active on a monthly basis. And so despite DAOs being a focal point of intellectual curiosity and sort of excitement for the space, the actual implementation and utilization of these frameworks has yet to be fully realized. And the pitfalls really are due to information asymmetry as well as a lack of participation and voter turnout. And that is due to a number of things, but mainly UX issues within Web3. And that includes on-chain voting being difficult. You have to pay like 30 cents every time you want to vote and wait so many seconds. Key-based access prevents anyone from using DAOs. So MetaMask actually, I believe Dapper Labs had a study on the uptake of CryptoKitties and found that 99% of people who had to download MetaMask decided not to. So that's a large deterrent for user and usability. And then also, it requires users to move to new platforms, essentially. That's another piece. And so what needs to happen in order for DAOs to be usable, sustainable, and effective is incremental decentralization, more usable tools for faster iteration, and then distribution to existing networks. And so incremental decentralization is a concept one of my co-founders kind of coined last May at EdCon, Eric Chung. And the idea is we create a really soft landing pad for users that have feeless transactions and frictionless onboarding. So you don't need ETH in order to enter into the blockchain or create an account and start interacting with an interface or interacting with the blockchain. The goal is to make it as smooth and simple as possible. We don't want them to think. We want to make it as appetizing. So the cake on the left or on the right here is less appetizing than the one on the left, right? We want to make it as appetizing as possible so that users can just like immediately know like, oh, that's what I want. That's what I want to do, without having to think about it. Usable tools, making money Legos, and so something that we've been building is the Signal DAO at Abridged, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. You guys can all try it out. But we're using a visual development platform in order to really quickly and effectively iterate and launch new features as well as new developments. And so it reduces the cost for experimentation and also increases access. So I'm not a developer myself, but I was able to create the first prototypes of the Signal DAO without even knowing how to code. And this is kind of the visual development environment that I mentioned that we're building. And then distribution to existing platforms. So the third piece here is we need to catch people where they are today. We can't expect people to like onboard into Web3 by moving from where they already are. It's much easier to take Web3 to and that also means that we need to have mobile first development. There's a stat, I think that I'm gonna mess up his last name, but Antonopoulos or Andreas Antonopoulos.
Andreas Antonopoulos.
Thank you, Antonopoulos.
Yeah.
He gave a talk at IDEO like probably in 2014 or something, and one of the stats was that more people have a cell phone internet connection than they do clean water in the world, and so that I think is pretty profound as far as like what mobile access, how important that is for blockchain usability and development. And so what we've decided to like create and like this concept is DAOOps. DAOOps is a set of practices that aims to systematize the management of DAO functions and reduce human coordination costs associated with resource allocation, decision-making processes, and membership administration. So that is sort of the way that we can wrap these existing DAO frameworks that Aragon, DAOstack, Colony, Commons, Thought have all spent so much time and energy building, and create a pathway for users to actually interact and touch these DAOs. And so this is like a quick little visual image where the outer rim is going to be like Telegram, Discord, Twitter, these social network interfaces where communities already live. The middle is this membrane, this interface, which is DAOOps, and the center is those Web3 frameworks. And again, so just gonna like dive into this. The Web3 frameworks are providing functionality and a common place for sort of upgrades and for core developers to keep iterating on protocols on the back end. The DAO ops piece is going to be the connective tissue that's listening to contracts provided by the DAO, as well as specific user tokens in order to create permissioned access systems and register members, and then also use or an API framework to connect to that front end to push notifications to users. And the Web 2 interface needs to be designed to allow for extremely simple pathways for that user to touch Web 3 as quickly as possible. So ideally, you could build it within the app, and whenever a voting proposal is up, you send a proposal to the user via the text interface or the chat interface, and they hit vote. Or they just hit a button that sends them directly to that client or the platform on the back end that can be mobile accessible. And so this is SignalDAO. You guys can scan it if you want to check it out and join. It's like takes 2 seconds. But we ran this test. It's been like 2 weeks since we launched. We have more than 100 members involved in SignalDAO, and it's using a Moloch framework in the back end. We found that that membership or voting participation rate is about 11%. Typically within DAO structures today is between like 2 and 5% for votes, and then in Moloch it's actually a little lower due to the social consensus mechanism of, okay, someone voted, I don't have to. But it does show that the effectiveness of what mobile interfaces do for participation in voting. So we found that there's an 11 times more likely chance for someone to vote within SignalDAO than there are within the Moloch frameworks. And tying this back from a key insight from my other co-founder, James Young, who built Farmville. Farmville was the most successful Facebook game ever at the time. And the reason it was the most successful Facebook game was because it was 99% up, where other Facebook games crashed. So they moved to the cloud faster than anyone else. That's the reason that they were successful. And in the same way, I see that if we can create systems that allow for end users to experience DAOs from anywhere, anytime, in multiple ways, that will also increase the efficacy and the ability for these systems to be successful in the future. Cool. So that's the presentation. Happy to take questions if you all have any. Yes?
Alright, so I was a SignalDAO user. It's pretty neat. I like it a lot. What's your theory of why people are going to want to use DAOs? Because I use them because they're neat, but if I'm trying to convince somebody on the street to join a DAO, what do you think is going to be the reason I get them to use it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the landscape's wide open, right? And so it's about sort of finding those first niches. And my dream would be to onboard people like the Extinction Rebellion. Are you familiar with them in the UK? So they're a group that's focused on global warming advocacy. And if they could all, through a Telegram or Facebook, interface, onboard into a DAO for $5, and there's like hundreds of thousands of them, and then have a pool of funds to then push funds to specific projects that are going to benefit their initiative, I think that would be extremely powerful. That's pretty, I don't know to what extent in the future that is, but that's like one of the places that I see as interesting and sort of exciting. I do see that I think social interfaces will be where these communities first form, where there's already groups of people on Facebook, on like aggregated Discord channels, etc., who could enhance their community by providing a little bit of like resources in the mix as well. So it's a bit open-ended, but.
What's your biggest learning from SignalDAO?
I think that the number, like 11 times more likely to participate in voting, I think is pretty powerful. And I think the other learning I think would be that SignalDAO has been relatively successful, but at the same time, it's also the community there is also partially there just to learn and engage. So I'm really interested to see what happens whenever we have a SignalDAO for a more specific cause that already has a community formed around it. So I think like the community not being formed prior to SignalDAO has potentially even dampened the voting participation necessary. Huh?
What are some of the things you funded in
Yeah, totally. Well, so the Metacartel, for instance, has funded every lightning talk that you've seen here. So DeFi Zap, we got funding for the SignalDAO. The Metagame has received funding, at least for the CLR, actually. And then, so the original piece of like what Moloch came to be and why Moloch exists is to fund ETH 2.0. And they have deployed 300 grand in capital to do so to about 35 different projects. And so that's a number of like research initiatives as well as like development initiatives and specs to push the ball forward.
When it comes to mobile development, and I appreciate the fact you talked about just like how important I think that is. What do you think is like the fact you're dealing with a huge spread of operating systems, browser support?
Yeah.
What is that fact?
That's a really great question. I'm actually gonna go back to this really briefly. So I've been thinking about this a lot, and we're starting to spec a design for like Aragon to initiate this DAOOps system for Aragon, first through Telegram and then through Discord. And the idea would be that the Telegram and Discord interfaces are really notification systems that are pushing, hey, here's a proposal. Behind that, in order to vote on the proposal, the user will need to click the button to like learn more about the proposal or vote, and then it'll come a web view will come up in their mobile browser, in the same browsers that Discord or Telegram, and they'll be able to vote through that view because that can host private keys, right? So that's good question. Cool. Anybody else, or we can? Sweet. Awesome. Thanks.